I came in 5 minutes early. Not because I'm a tryhard, but because I like silence before the hyenas start yapping. The office is usually quiet at 8:55 a.m., just the soft hum of screens, and that one ancient HVAC vent that rattles like it's dying in Morse code. But today there was a buzz. A stifled, anticipatory kind of quiet. Like a middle school prank was about to go live. I didn't notice it at first. I walked straight to my cubicle, coffee in hand, mentally prepping for another day of pretending my job wasn't soul rot with a dental plan. And then I saw it. Taped to my monitor. A piece of bright yellow paper, curling slightly at the edges from the cheap Scotch tape. Thick sharpest strokes in all caps, jagged like someone was laughing while they wrote it. Loser. Just that. No smiley face. No context. Just a word that, somehow, screamed louder than a siren. The snickering started before I could even process it. A sloppy, wet laugh sort of snickering. Someone by the printer let out a full cackle and quickly pretended to cough. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel them, their necks craned over cubicle walls like prairie dogs with LinkedIn profiles, waiting for me to melt. I stood there, holding my lukewarm Starbucks like it was a goddamn microphone. I stared at the sign and tilted my head, like I was trying to read something profound, something philosophical. Maybe I was, because in that moment, something in me broke, but not the way they expected. Not the mascara smudge sobbing, not the HR complaint, not the angry hissy fit that would confirm whatever sick office narrative they'd been scripting behind my back. No. I smiled. That slow, acidic kind of smile you get when your mom says, "It's fine, I didn't expect a birthday call anyway." The kind of smile that says, "Noted. Filed. Weaponized." I peeled the sign off my monitor with 2 fingers, deliberately slow, like I was defusing a bomb. The adhesive tugged a bit and made a ripping sound that cut through the laughter. I held it up in front of me like a piece of modern art. Then I folded it once, then again. Perfect little squares. Origami revenge. I dropped it in the trash without a word. Sat down. Logged in. They didn't know what to do with that. The silence after was uglier than the laughter. No one likes it when the target doesn't flinch. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jason from sales bite the inside of his cheek. Stephanie from HR actually whispered, "Damn," like she'd lost a bet. And in that moment, I knew something they didn't. They wanted a show. They expected the loser to cry. But I don't perform on command. I burn stages. And somewhere between that folded sign and my login screen, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't just outlast them. I'd unravel them. One smug giggle at a time. This wasn't a workplace anymore. It was a game board. And they just handed me the first move. The cafeteria was half empty and full of noise. That's the paradox of open-plan lunchrooms. Somehow, even when they're barely occupied, the echo of clinking plastic forks and empty chatter is louder than any boardroom yelling match. I sat at the back, near the dusty vending machine no one restocks anymore. My turkey sandwich tasted like drywall and bitterness. I didn't cry. I chewed. Let them imagine I was sulking. Let them project whatever fragile narrative made their weak egos feel taller. The truth was quieter, heavier. I was remembering. Not just the sign this morning, but the pattern. The mosaic of quiet humiliations that had become the wallpaper of my tenure here. Like that time last quarter when Greg took full credit in the team meeting for the dashboard I built from scratch, down to the color palette. Or when marketing forgot to include me on the product launch email chain, then blamed me for not catching the typo in the ad copy that cost us a client. Or Stephanie with her signature smirk whispering she's harmless, like I was a chipped coffee mug, ugly but usable. I'd spent years being the quiet one. The reliable one. The safe one. The one who'd fix it after hours without being asked, who never demanded a seat at the table because I built the table and let them pretend they brought it from Pottery Barn. And I watched. I watched every promotion pass over me like I was invisible. Every praise routed to louder mouths. Every solution I whispered in meetings regurgitated by someone else 10 minutes later, suddenly brilliant when packaged in a deeper voice. This morning's sign wasn't the beginning. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a long, snide sentence. My fork scraped against the cheap plastic tray. HR? No. I wasn't walking into that trap. HR would blink at me with false sympathy and promise a sternly worded email. Maybe they'd suggest a team-building exercise or worse, a diversity seminar hosted by the same guys who laughed when I walked in this morning. I'd be recast as emotional for being insulted, and they'd all find a way to make me the problem. No, I wasn't going to HR. I was going above. There are always people watching. Not the loud ones, not the insecure men with oversized job titles, but the real eyes. The owners, the investors, the silent stakeholders whose names you only see in fine print on quarterly reports. They didn't know my name yet. But they would. Because while the office giggled over Sharpa signs and cafeteria gossip, I had receipts. I had code commits with timestamps. I had Slack exports. I had buried warnings I'd sent about the server vulnerabilities they ignored. I had the email from our biggest client thanking me by name for saving the backend deployment when their own team fumbled it. They handed me humiliation, thinking it would shrink me. But some of us don't cry in the bathroom. Some of us become very, very quiet. And very, very dangerous. I crumpled my napkin like it was a throat I wasn't allowed to grab. Then I stood up. Let them laugh a little longer. They were about to learn that the quiet one wasn't quiet because she was weak. She was quiet because noise is a poor substitute for power. And I was done whispering. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like they were suspended in a freeze frame. Every tendon tight, every knuckle white. The screen glared back at her, cursor blinking like a metronome for judgment. She hadn't taken a breath in 20 seconds. Then she exhaled, slow and shallow, and started typing. To compliance@remcoregroup.com. Subject: urgent. Documented violations at local subsidiary. The body of the email wasn't long. Barely 4 paragraphs. Not a single wasted word. No teatrix. Just the cold, structured anatomy of the truth. Each bullet point was a dagger made of data. Screenshots of Jason from sales forging internal metrics to pad quarterly reports. Time-stamped Slack logs of Stephanie mocking a disabled coworker and encouraging others to gaslight HR before they gaslight us. Server logs showing that Greg authorized a security patch rollback to save time without notifying the client, directly violating GDPR protocol. A chain of unanswered emails she had sent, dating back 9 months, warning about these issues. Each one ignored, deflected, or casually brushed aside. She attached a compressed folder labeled documentation.zip. Inside it, 97 files. All named, all categorized. Spreadsheets, recordings, PDFs. A curated gallery of corporate rot, neatly organized and time-stamped. She reread the email twice. Then once more. No emotion. No adjectives. Just facts. Her hand trembled slightly as she moved the mouse to hover over send. It wasn't fear of being caught. She already knew none of them had the spine to trace it back without tipping off legal. It was the weight of what this button meant. The nuclear option. She wasn't warning anyone this time. She was launching. And yet, she felt oddly calm. Like standing in the eye of a storm that had been building for years. Everything quiet, still waiting. Her reflection in the black portion of the screen looked back at her, shoulders tense, jaw set. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a reckoning. Click. The email flew off like a torpedo through digital corridors. No dramática información. No drumroll. Just the simple message. Sent. She sat back. The silence roared. The next move wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to strangers in suits hundreds of miles away. Compliance officers who didn't care about cafeteria pranks or office politics. Only liability. Only risk. Would they act fast enough? Would they flag it? Would they even believe her? She didn't know. But she knew this. When fire hits dry rot, it doesn't ask permission. It burns. And her email wasn't a cry for help. It was a lit match dropped into a room full of kerosene. Now she waited to see who would smell the smoke first. That IT started with a calendar invite. No subject line. No agenda. Just 15 minutes with an unfamiliar name, Irene M. Corp Compliance Oversight. The meeting was marked private, dropped quietly onto the regional director's schedule at 6:42 a.m. By 8:17 it had been forwarded, once, twice, then 5 times in quick succession, trickling downward like blood and water. By noon, The whispers had metastasized. People walked faster in the halls, heads ducked, conversations clipped short the moment she passed. Normally loud coworkers now spoke in pairs, not groups. Eyes darted. Slack went strangely quiet, like the whole office had flinched from something they couldn't see but suddenly feared. She sat at her desk, sipping stale break-room coffee with all the serenity of a monk at a funeral. Her screen glowed with spreadsheets. Her posture was perfect. On the outside, nothing had changed. But inside? Oh, inside she was electric, buzzing with the grim amusement of someone watching her enemies flinch before they even understood why. She heard someone mutter compliance sweep near the printer. Another person asked, did something happen with the client data thing? And got shushed so aggressively it echoed. She didn't say a word. Not once. When Stephanie cornered Greg and hissed, "You don't think it's about that, do you?" In the hallway, she simply walked past, earbuds in, not listening to anything. Just letting their anxiety simmer. They were looking for someone to blame. They just hadn't figured out it was already too late. That afternoon, 2 managers were pulled into back-to-back closed-door meetings. No one knew what was said inside, but when they came out, they weren't smirking anymore. They avoided eye contact. One of them sent an all-hands email about data hygiene and internal reporting protocols, trying to sound casual but coming off like a toddler in a burning house pretending it's warm and cozy. The scent of corporate panic was subtle, but unmistakable. She felt it like a breeze through cracked glass. The tightening of policies, the sudden disappearance of certain files from the shared drive, the long pauses before Slack messages were sent. A wave of CYA energy was rippling through the building. And still, no one mentioned the loser sign. No one dared. Because now the loser wasn't crying in the bathroom. She was sipping coffee and typing like nothing had happened, while the walls slowly, quietly began to sweat. They didn't know what she had done. Not exactly. But they could feel it. It was like standing in a dry forest and realizing someone, somewhere, had just struck a match. And in the vacuum of silence she left behind, their own guilt filled in the blanks, each whisper louder than the last, each closed door a mirror turning inward. She didn't need to speak. She had already said everything. Now she just waited for the fire to find its voice. IT began with pastries. Monday morning, someone left a box of warm croissants on her desk, anonymously. The box was labeled with a post-it that said, "Figured you'd appreciate a Monday boost," smiley face. No name. No note. Just flaky, suspicious kindness reeking of guilt and butter. By 10 a.m., Jason from sales was suddenly so interested in how her weekend went. She hadn't spoken more than 3 sentences to him in 2 years, and now he was practically leaning into her personal space like they were old high school debate teammates. "Crazy vibe in here today, huh?" He chuckled, eyes flicking too quickly between her and her screen. Rumors flying. Total paranoia. But I mean, nothing you would know anything about, right? She just blinked slowly, took a bite of the croissant, smiled. By lunchtime, the friendly swarm had tripled. People who once rolled their eyes when she asked for proper version control were suddenly checking in, swinging by, or just saying hey. Even Stephanie, who used to scoff audibly when she spoke in meetings, made a big show of complimenting her blouse in the break room. "I always said you had such quiet strength," Stephanie said, hand hovering near her shoulder like a forced ghost of sisterhood. She didn't reply, just looked down at the microwave clock, as if she were timing a roast. Then came the summons. "Hey," drawled Martin, the senior operations lead, a man who hadn't made direct eye contact with her in a year. "Mind popping into my office for a quick catch-up? Just a casual touch base. Nothing formal. We're a family here." She followed him silently down the hall, past colleagues who avoided her gaze like they were passing a ghost. Martin's office still smelled like expensive hand sanitizer and panic sweat. He gestured to the chair across from his desk with both hands, like presenting a prize. "I just want to say," he began, tone syrupy and brittle, "we've always seen your value. Truly. This place wouldn't run without folks like you. Solid. Steady. Reliable." She tilted her head slightly, a smile curling, not warm, not cruel. Just observant. "Things have gotten a little tense lately," Martin continued, adjusting his tie even though it didn't need adjusting. "We don't know what's causing the noise, but we want to make sure you're feeling supported, safe, valued. He paused there, fishing, hoping she'd blink, speak, crack, confess. But she just raised one brow. Honestly, he added a little faster now, if there's anything you need, anything at all, my door is always open. You know, transparency is important. No secrets between family. She studied him for a moment. Family. What a choice of words. Family is what they call it when they want you to suffer politely. Family is how they excuse betrayal with potlucks. She stood, adjusting her blazer. I appreciate that, Martin, she said with clinical warmth. You're right. Transparency is everything. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. As she walked out of his office, she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass wall, upright, calm, composed. And in that reflection, she saw it clearly for the first time. She wasn't powerless anymore. She had stopped asking for space at the table. She had become the one deciding who got to eat. And the people who laughed? Now they were knocking, smiling too wide, asking if she wanted to grab coffee sometime. But she didn't need their company. She wasn't lonely. She was loaded, with leverage, and they could feel it in the way she walked. The tide had shifted, and she was the current now. They arrived on a Wednesday. No warning. No introductory email. No HR-friendly, hello team Slack message with headshots and fun facts about their dogs. Just 4 people in gray suits, badges on lanyards, and the kind of expressions usually reserved for court summons or body identification. By 9:12 a.m., the door to the main conference room was locked from the inside. By 9:30, they'd pulled 3 directors off the floor mid-call. By 10 o'clock, the internal server was locked down, the SharePoint access frozen, and every email inbox silently duplicated into a forensic archive. They didn't say why. They didn't have to. The rumor mill exploded like a gas line under pressure. People whispered in break rooms, in stairwells, even in bathroom stalls, desperate to confirm or deny what they were too afraid to ask out loud. Audit wasn't even the word anymore. Now it was seizure. Now it was investigation. Now it was they're talking to legal. Someone said the big pharma client froze its contract pending ethics review. Another claimed an investor had already pulled out. The receptionist quit before noon. 2 engineers on the data team disappeared into a meeting and didn't come back for hours. And in the eye of that hurricane sat her, typing, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the building eat itself alive. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't ask questions. She just existed. Calm, steady, a pillar of unnerving silence while the rest of them turned on each other, like rats in a flooding cellar. Jason from sales tried to blame IT miscommunication. Greg tried to pin everything on Stephanie, calling her toxic and uncooperative with protocol. Stephanie? She sobbed, then raged, then forwarded a 6-month-old email chain and shouted, I warned you, loud enough to be heard through the wall. Closed-door meetings turned into shouting matches. Desks were cleared mid-shift. A compliance officer was seen dragging 2 full bankers' boxes to their rental car, the corners of one box marked with Jason's initials in blue pen. She sat still and watched. She watched as the same people who mocked her, ignored her, belittled her, now turned inward, fangs bared, alliances crumbling. Every whispered insult, every backroom joke, every smug dismissal, now unraveling like thread caught on a nail. And the beauty of it all? They still didn't know who lit the match. From her cubicle, she could see Greg pacing near the windows, red-faced and muttering. At one point he shouted, well, someone gave them those files. And no one replied. Because no one was certain anymore who was watching, or who was next. She turned back to her screen, opened a spreadsheet, and made a tiny update no one would notice. Because that's what she did. She got things done. Quietly. Thoroughly. Precisely. The fire was spreading now. Not metaphorically, structurally. The company's skeleton was starting to fracture. Contracts on pause, bonuses withheld, and an emergency board call scheduled for after hours. And all she felt was stillness. Like standing on a hill while the town below burns, warm wind against her face, the smell of smoke tangled in her hair, and the knowledge that no one thought to check her hands for matches. There was satisfaction, yes, but also something surreal. She had always wondered if justice ever really landed. Now she was watching it unfold like a slow, inevitable avalanche, and it looked nothing like righteousness. It looked like chaos, panic, burnt reputations and broken alliances. And in the center of it all stood the one they called loser. Not crying, not begging, just watching the fire she built do what fire does best. The first offer came wrapped in flattery. Martin, still clinging to his title like a life vest on a sinking ship, asked to chat privately again. She expected more vague platitudes, more performative concern. But what she got was desperation masquerading as diplomacy. He closed the blinds, turned off the office camera, even powered off his phone, placing it face down on the desk like it might betray him. "We understand there's been a misunderstanding," he began, voice low, hands tented like a fake monk. "A lot of noise. A lot of confusion. But you've always been level-headed. Smart. A team player." She said nothing. "We'd really appreciate it," he continued, "if you could just clarify a few things. Help us smooth this over with corporate. Maybe walk back a few claims if you feel they were misconstrued." He smiled too wide. "No blame. Just clarity." Then came the carrot. "You'd be promoted immediately. Lead role. Significant raise. Full benefits package adjustment. Title bump. And a retention bonus," he added quickly, as if throwing more money at the wound would stop it from bleeding. "Just say the word." She blinked once, then smiled slow and cold. "Oh," she said sweetly. "You want me to tell the fire marshal I was just lighting candles?" He paled. The second offer came later that day, this time from HR. Not Stephanie. Stephanie had already been reassigned pending investigation. No, this was a corporate handler flown in from headquarters, wearing a navy blazer and a face that hadn't smiled in months. "We're willing to discuss options," the woman said, cool and practiced. "If this can be resolved quickly, there are incentive pathways. NDA included, of course." She almost laughed out loud. Incentive pathways. These were the same people who pretended not to see her, who let her warnings rot in inboxes, who allowed a culture of mockery, theft, and abuse to fester, then only blinked when fire scorched the foundation. And now they were offering her chains with velvet lining. There was a flicker of temptation. She won't deny it. A sliver of her wanted to say yes, to step back into the system with a better title, a padded paycheck, and a smug little "told you so." It would be easy, neat, survivable. But then she remembered the sign. The laughter. The years of silence swallowed with a smile. She didn't want their money. She wanted their memory of her to burn. So she leaned in, just enough to make them hope. "I'd like to offer a clarification," she said, voice syrup smooth. They perked up. Pens poised. She smiled, wide and dead behind the eyes. "I wasn't misunderstood. You just weren't listening." She stood. No retractions. No edits. And certainly no NDA. They stammered. She didn't stay to hear what followed. Because her pride wasn't a wound, it was armor. And every offer they made was just another nail in the coffin of their illusion that they still held any power over her. They had underestimated the quiet one. Now they wanted to bribe her silence. But she wasn't silent anymore. And they couldn't afford her voice to be why Friday morning. The office didn't look like an office anymore. The kitchen was abandoned, half-drunk coffee still warm. The fridge door left cracked open like someone fled mid-sentence. Laptops were closed. Phones silenced. The only sound was the soft shuffle of desperate footsteps, and the quiet ticking of an implosion no one could stop. She sat at her desk, spine straight, perfectly still. Her inbox was full, not with project briefs or updates, but with apologies. Thinly veiled. Some groveling. Some defensive. Some openly begging. Subject lines like, "Hey, can we talk? I didn't know, I swear." From one woman to another. "Please help us fix this." She didn't open them. Didn't need to. You can hear the tone in the subject line when someone's life is unraveling. The final wave began at 11:32 a.m. Jason, the same man who used to snort when she spoke, stood in front of her desk like a child waiting outside the principal's office. Eyes red. Shoulders caved in. No sales pitch in sight. I didn't mean it, he stammered. We were just messing around. You know how it is. She didn't look up. I have 2 kids, he added. If this gets worse, I could lose everything. Then his voice cracked. We could all lose our jobs. That did it. She looked at him, really looked. Saw the sheen of panic on his forehead. The sweat breaking through his expensive cologne. The fragile shell of a man who once chuckled when she got cut off in meetings. She let the silence hang. Let it ache. Then, with a voice that didn't tremble, didn't rise, didn't falter, she said, You should have thought of that before the sign. Jason recoiled like she slapped him. But she hadn't lifted a hand. She didn't need to. Word spread quickly, she said it. The sentence. The one they all knew was coming. After that, it was a parade. Stephanie showed up next, makeup smudged, trying to conjure sisterhood from dust. They're tearing everything apart. If we just go to them together, maybe. Blocked. The project lead she once warned about a data breach, the one who told her, It's fine, don't be so uptight, sent her a Slack DM. We never meant for things to get like this. I didn't know they'd dig up so much. Blocked. Martin, the same exec who offered her hush money in a wool suit, texted her cell directly. We're on the same side now. Let's talk. Blocked. She watched them spiral, each one reaching out with fingers bloodied by the very wreckage they created. They thought apologies were currency, that tears were retroactive shields. But this wasn't a redemption arc. This was Judgment Day. She clicked through each message, each pathetic peace offering, not to respond, but to acknowledge receipt. Then she did the only thing that mattered now. Block. 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 She wasn't a participant in their collapse anymore. She was the perimeter. And if there was any sadness left in her, it wasn't for them. It was for the version of herself who once tried so hard to be part of something that was never meant to protect her. Empowerment, it turns out, doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it's cold, bitter, hollow-edged, but it is power. And now at last she had it. Not because they gave it to her, because they lost it. The moment they laughed, she printed her resignation on company letterhead. No dramatic fonts, no manifesto. Just 2 sentences. Effective immediately, I resign from my position. No further communication is necessary. No thank you, no farewell. Just facts. She left the letter on Martin's empty desk. He hadn't shown up in 2 days. HR was a ghost town. Half the leadership team was either suspended, reassigned, or under official review. The break room fridge had started leaking. Someone had ripped the team goals poster off the wall. The potted plant by the elevator had wilted and given up, as if even the flora knew it was over. No one tried to stop her. Not anymore. No fake smiles. No last-minute offers. The people who once mocked her now couldn't even meet her eyes. She shut down her laptop for the last time, removed the sticky note with her password, she'd never needed it anyway, and tucked her few belongings into a small black tote. No cardboard box. No scene. She wasn't giving them that. She walked past the rows of cubicles, some abandoned mid-task, some eerily still occupied by people pretending not to be afraid. Phones rang with no one picking up. A notification pinged loudly in the silence. Urgent. Investigative subpoena. Immediate response required. She didn't turn back. Outside, the air was cool. The sky was overcast, but not gray enough to ruin the moment. She walked 3 blocks to her favorite coffee shop, ordered a dark roast with oat milk, no sugar, and sat by the window facing the building that once tried to swallow her whole. She pulled out her phone, opened her work email one last time. Over 340 unread messages, each one more frantic than the last. She scrolled slowly. Martin, let's talk. Please. Stephanie. It's getting worse. They're blaming me for everything. Jason. I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd dig up my old numbers. Corporate HR. Official notice of data preservation request. She tapped select all. Delete. The inbox emptied like a vanishing act. She took a long sip of coffee, warm and steady in her hands. Then she closed her laptop, slipped it into her bag, and leaned back in her chair. Through the cafe window, she watched the office, her old battleground, implode in slow motion. Not with fire or screaming, but with resignation. With the weight of every lie, every slight, every unethical shortcut finally exposed to daylight. And no one saw her sitting there. She didn't need to be seen anymore. She'd done what needed doing. Not with a bang, but with precision. With silence. With a grace so cold it burned. And as she stirred the last swirl of oat milk into her cup, she let the final thought land, soft but sharp. They called me a loser. Funny how losers get the last word. She didn't just win. She annihilated. And salted the earth behind her.